Welcome to the channel, Cheating Secrets. It was early Sunday morning when someone rang my doorbell. I was a bit surprised, since I hadn't told anyone where I was living now. My surprise only grew when I opened the door. Standing in the hallway were my wife, her parents, her sister, and my brother-in-law. I resisted the initial urge to slam the door in their faces. I had been raised better than that. Besides, I was thinking about my father and mother-in-law, Chester and Dottie Hanson, as well as their younger daughter, Marion. I would never deliberately be rude to them. My wife, Debbie, on the other hand, stirred far less charitable emotions in me. Slamming the door in her face would have been a genuine pleasure. Jack. We're here to discuss this issue civilly. Mom, Dad, and Marion believe they can help me sort out the situation. Dave is naturally part of our family matters. Please, let us in, Debbie insisted, clearly confident I would agree. I shrugged and stepped aside to let them all in. I didn't have enough furniture for everyone to sit, so I brought in 2 more chairs from my tiny kitchen so Dave and I could use them. Then I brought in a 6-pack of soda and another of beer, placing them on a wobbly plastic and wood structure that served as an end table. Everyone's welcome to help themselves to a soda or a beer. That's all I have to offer, I said, uncapping a bottle of Miller. You should know we're here to try and understand the reason behind your inexcusable actions, Debbie began. None of us thought you were the kind of man who would evade the truth and lie. We'd like to know why you did it, and whether you've come to your senses. Debbie's tone irritated me to no end, but I didn't respond the way I wanted to, at least not right away. Instead, I took a moment to consider her question. I looked at Dottie and tried to relax. She was tense and wringing her hands. It was clear she was upset, and I didn't want to make things worse for her. Then I turned to Chester and saw anger on his face. That didn't surprise me. He was a good man who believed family was the most important thing in life. I noticed Marion's eyes were wet as she watched me, and Dave was reading the label on his beer can, carefully avoiding eye contact. I knew enough about how families work to be certain Dave had been practically dragged into this meeting. He wasn't here because he wanted to be. Well, Debbie, I'm sorry I've turned out to be such a disappointment to your whole family, but that doesn't change anything. I'm going through with the divorce. Your lawyer can discuss the details with mine. There's no need for drama, it's pointless, I added. You're really going to throw away nearly 20 years of marriage for some adulteress? Debbie demanded. That's not like you, Jack. You've always been responsible and level-headed. You never shirked your duties as a father and provider. This makes no sense. Blame it on good old-fashioned midlife crisis, if that helps you sleep at night, Debbie, I replied. Or go ahead, drugs, alcohol abuse, blackmail, aliens, whatever makes it easier for you to find some meaning in all this. The end result is the same, I'm divorcing you, regardless of the reason or whether it makes sense to you. Just accept it. Jack, Chester interjected. We hired a private investigator to figure out what's going on with you. He's only been working for us a couple of days, but he already found your new address. However, he couldn't discover anything about a woman who might have caught your interest. Does such a woman even exist? That caught me off guard. I should have known Chester wouldn't take the situation at face value. He needed facts and names, so he hired a private eye. I quickly tried to recall everything I'd done over the past 2 days, every place I'd gone, everything I might have said or done. Nothing stood out that could have exposed my situation. I hadn't spoken to anyone about my personal life. There was nothing anyone could have learned about me, aside from where I currently lived. I'm not sure what offends me more, Chester, being called a liar, or the fact that you apparently think I'm incapable of attracting a woman who might actually find me acceptable, I replied calmly. I don't owe anyone an explanation for my actions. And I certainly don't owe you the name of the woman I love. If there were another woman, she'd be a true lady, and I wouldn't drag her name into this mess. Chester didn't mean to call you a liar, or to suggest that you wouldn't be a wonderful catch for any smart woman, Jack, Dottie said in a conciliatory tone. It's just that no one who knows you, truly knows you, can believe you would betray your marriage vows. You've always been a strong, dependable husband and father. Wanting a divorce just doesn't seem like you. We're worried, for a lot of reasons. I understand your confusion, Dottie. I'd give anything not to cause you or Chester any pain. But things happen, and people change. With the utmost respect for both of you, I'm telling you now I don't want to be your daughter's husband anymore, I wheezed, my throat suddenly dry. You all have to accept that. Jack, if you're just afraid to admit you made a mistake and want to come back, I'll forgive you, Debbie sobbed. I'll never throw this slip up in your face or use it to turn the kids against you. I promise. How about that? Debbie was ready to forgive me. She was willing to take back her unfaithful husband. Her statement caught me off guard. I had to ask myself a question. Why, Debbie? Why are you forgiving me and taking me back into your arms and into your bed? Why? Debbie repeated. Because we belong to each other, Jack. Because we made a promise to stay together nearly 20 years ago. Because the children need their father. That's why, Jack. I saw Marion flinch slightly at her sister's response. We must have both noticed the same thing. Debbie's reasoning lacked real conviction. And that's it, Debbie? I asked. You'll take me back just because we made a vow? Not because you actually still love me? You say the children need me, as if I'll suddenly stop seeing them once we're divorced. They're already old enough to carry that burden, and in a few years, they'll be completely independent. But even then, I won't abandon them. Don't fool yourself. I'll still be an important part of my children's lives. That, I promise. Of course I love you, Jack. Debbie declared. But you're acting so foolishly. I just don't want to pretend that your recent actions haven't hurt or upset me. You left me, maybe for another woman. How am I supposed to feel love for you in a situation like that? You obviously don't love me anymore, and that hurts. It hurts so much. I've always loved you, Debbie. I still do, but that's no longer enough. I have to keep living before life passes me by. And I suggest you do the same. I believe this meeting is just about over, I said quietly, with a note of sadness. Debbie, Marion, and Dottie were crying, wiping their eyes with tissues as I opened the door. Chester was frowning, and Dave, it seemed, felt a sense of relief. As Marion moved toward the door, she paused to give me a hug. I had always gotten along well with Debbie's younger sister, and I felt deeply ashamed that I had let her down. I could only hope she would never truly understand how much. Debbie was the last to leave. She looked heartbroken as she came up close to me, seeming to look straight into my soul. She appeared completely lost, as if searching my face for some kind of sign, some last chance. I simply nodded and gently guided her by the elbow toward the door. As soon as I managed to close and lock it behind them, I went to the medicine cabinet and took a couple of painkillers. Then I lay down on the bed, emotionally and physically exhausted. Eventually, I fell asleep. Fortunately for me, my job was extremely demanding. I can't imagine how I would have gotten through the next few weeks if I hadn't had something to distract me from my personal problems. I spent some time trying to determine whether anyone might be following me. I took different routes to and from work. From time to time, I made sudden sharp turns without signaling my intentions that I didn't see a single car turn off to follow me. Either the private investigator had dropped the case, or he was very good at what he did. It was Thursday evening, more than 2 weeks since Debbie's family had shown up at my door for that conference, when I got a call on my cell phone from Marion. I had changed phones and gotten a new number, so I was surprised she had it. I had only given it to my 2 sons, which made it clear that Marion had coaxed it out of one of them. "Jack!" Marion shouted into the phone. "Danny is missing. She didn't come home from school today. I've called every house I can think of, but no one's seen her. She never goes anywhere without calling. Have you seen her by any chance?" Danny is Marion's 14-year-old daughter. She's a beautiful girl, but very shy and quiet. She also has an older brother and a younger sister, but she was always my favorite. Ever since she learned to walk, she would run up to me and wrap her little arms around my legs. Marion, Dottie, and Debbie often said that Danny never gave anyone much attention, but she always came to me. As she grew older, our bond only strengthened. I always made time to ask her about school and her friends. I played soccer with her and showed her how to catch in softball. Whenever we had family gatherings, Danny was usually somewhere near me. "No, Marion, I haven't seen her," I replied, concerned. "You've probably already tried calling her cell phone, right? Have you tried reaching out to any of her teachers at school? They might know something. Was she feeling okay? She's been unusually quiet and withdrawn lately. Something's bothering her, but she doesn't want to tell me what it is, Jack. I even thought about asking you to talk to her. She always opens up to you," Marion sobbed. "Can you think of where she might be?" "I can't, Marion," I replied. "But I'll drive around the area and see if I can find anything. Call me the moment you hear anything about her. I'll do the same if I find her." "Thank you, Jack." Marion sobbed again. "I knew you'd help." As I drove around the neighborhood, I tried to imagine what could have happened to Danny. I stopped by her softball coach's house to ask if she had seen Danny at school that day and whether she had seemed okay. "I didn't see her today, Jack," said Mrs. Mack, clearly concerned. "There was a water main break at the middle school this morning. The kids were sent home early. As you know, her family lives close enough for her to walk home. I have no idea why she wouldn't have made it there." I thanked Mrs. Mack for the information and returned to my car. I decided to drive past the school, then follow the route Danny usually took to walk home. Soon I reached the school and slowly started driving toward Danny's house. I didn't see anything unusual. However, I did notice several cars, including Debbie's, parked in Marion's driveway. Knowing that Marion would have called me if Danny had turned up, I kept driving. By then, night had fallen, and a nearly full moon had risen. About half a mile from Marion's house was a wooded area spanning roughly 100 acres. As I passed by it, I remembered how Danny had insisted I take a walk there with her one Sunday afternoon. She had led me down a trail to an elaborate tree stand built by a deer hunter. It looked more like a small treehouse, about 20 feet above the forest floor. It had 4 walls, a roof, and window openings on all sides. I had climbed the ladder with her and looked around. The furnishings included 2 chairs and a small army-style cot. Cans of beans and bottles of water were stored on a small shelf that looked like a makeshift pantry. Danny told me this was her personal space, like a private fortress. She came there whenever dealing with her brother and sister, her friends, or her parents became too overwhelming. She said no one else in her family knew about this little hideout. Since I had no other choice, I parked the car and found the trail that led to the tree. As I climbed the ladder, a sense of foreboding came over me. That's where I found Danny. She was asleep on the cot, but I couldn't get any response from her when I tried to wake her. I put my ear close to her mouth and caught the sound of very shallow breathing. Then, in the moonlight, I saw a prescription bottle. There wasn't enough light to read the label. I knew immediately that the situation was serious. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. I briefly explained my concerns and gave them my location. The ambulance was about 20 minutes away, so I told the dispatcher I would drive her to meet them to save time. But the dispatcher instructed me not to move Danny, just in case she had sustained any physical injuries. I told the dispatcher I would meet the paramedics on Route 92, a few miles south of the town baseball field, and hung up. I slipped the empty pill bottle into my pocket, carefully lifted Danny over my shoulder, and cautiously climbed down the ladder. As quickly as I could, I made my way through the thick woods to my car and sped off to meet the ambulance. A few minutes later, I stopped and flashed my headlights when I saw the ambulance approaching from the opposite direction. Soon, Danny was loaded into the vehicle, and the paramedics began working on her frantically as the rescue vehicle raced toward the hospital. I handed them the empty medication bottle, hoping it would help in treating Danny. Driving behind them, I dialed Marion's number. When she answered, her voice was filled with fury. "Jack. Have you heard anything about Danny? Did you find her? Please, Jack, tell me you found her." Marion begged. "Marion, she's in the ambulance on the way to the county hospital. I can't tell you much else, except that it's pretty serious, and you need to get there as soon as possible," I said. "The county hospital." Marion cried out, then began sobbing so hard she could barely speak. There was a click on the line, and then I heard another voice, "Jack, it's Debbie. What happened to Danny? Where was she? How did you find her?" she asked rapidly, without pausing. "Debbie, all you need to know is that Danny is seriously ill and is on her way to the county hospital. The paramedics are doing everything they can, but someone needs to get Marion to the hospital, safely, but quickly," I said firmly, and then hung up to focus on driving. I waited outside the emergency room. Since Danny was a minor and her parents had called to say they were on their way, I wasn't given any information. I was pacing the floor when a police officer found me. I was still answering his questions, which seemed to be the same ones every relative I brought to the waiting area also wanted to ask, when the officer finally finished, and I was immediately surrounded by Danny's relatives. "I found Danny in a deer stand that's actually more like a small cabin in the Anderson woods behind your house." I remembered that she had shown it to me a couple of years ago. It was the only place that came to mind to search. She was there, but almost in a coma. An empty prescription bottle was lying next to her. I called the ambulance and met them on Highway 92. Then I called Marion, and that's all I know. For any further information, you'll need to speak with the doctors and nurses, I concluded. At that moment, a nurse came out of the emergency room, and the group rushed toward her. I took the opportunity to slip away to my car and head back to my gloomy apartment. Once there, I drank a couple of beers and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easily, as I kept worrying about my niece, a beautiful teenage girl. Why did she do it? Would she recover? I sincerely hoped I had found her in time. That it felt like I had just fallen asleep when the doorbell rang, once, then again, and again. Staggering, I made my way to the living room and opened the door. Before I could even recognize who was ringing, I was pulled into a tight hug. Gradually, I realized it was Dottie embracing me. Chester and Debbie stood behind her in the doorway. Since Dottie couldn't form a single coherent word through her tears, Chester took it upon himself to explain. "Danny is out of danger. Dottie insisted that we come and thank you in person. Jack, our entire family owes you a great debt. If you hadn't found Danny when you did, the outcome would have been very different, and far worse," Chester said with emotion. "You saved her life, Jack." I felt tears streaming down my cheeks as I hugged Dottie back. I had done something good for Marion and her parents, and I had saved the life of a wonderful girl. It helped ease the burden of guilt I'd been carrying since asking for a divorce from their daughter. I noticed Debbie looking past me through the open door into my bedroom. My rumpled bed was in full view, clearly empty. I realized she was probably searching for evidence of a mistress. She definitely wouldn't find one here. Then Debbie stepped into the room and said, "Jack, this terrible event has brought us, and our family, closer together. Sometimes something very negative can end up creating something very good. This might be one of those moments, Jack. Why don't you come back home, where you truly belong? You had your space, your little fling, I suppose we can call it that. Now is the time to forgive and forget. Debbie, you surprise me. It's hard to believe you could forgive me so easily. I don't think I'd be that generous if the roles were reversed. How can you live with someone you don't even trust?" I asked. "Jack, if you tell me it won't happen again, I'll have to believe you. I think you've realized how important your family is to you," Debbie reasoned. "I'm not thrilled about what you've done lately, but I'm willing to work through it. I think that's the difference between you and me, Debbie. I believe that in a marriage, or any partnership, there are certain boundaries. Both partners need to agree on them, and they need to honor them, I added. Our marriage can't be fixed. We need to move on and stop wasting time on what was, or what could have been. Debbie let out a sob, turned sharply, and rushed out of the room. Dottie recoiled and looked at me as if I had two heads. Chester's face was red, and his anger was plain to see. You've always been stubborn, Jack, Dottie said. But you've also always been noble and dependable. Well, Dottie, it looks like I've changed, and probably not for the better, I said with a shrug. I find that interesting, Jack, Dottie replied, slowly shaking her head. I really do wonder why. After Debbie and her parents left, I decided to take a shower and get ready for work. It was still early, and I'd only managed a little sleep, but I didn't want to waste sick days just because I felt like crap. Sick days are for golf and baseball. It was already 3 in the afternoon when Marion called me. She was extremely grateful for what I had done to help save Danny. Jack, I don't know what's going on between you and Debbie, and I'm not even going to ask. I just want you to know that when it comes to me and Danny, you can do no wrong. I have no words to describe how I feel, Marion exclaimed. Believe me, Marion, I'm honored that you thought of me in such a difficult moment, and I'm glad I was able to help Danny. She's a wonderful girl, practically the daughter I never had. There's nothing I wouldn't do for her. That's exactly why I'm calling, Jack. I have another request. Danny is supposed to come home tomorrow. She's shutting us out and won't tell anyone why. She says she wants to live with you, Jack, Marion said. Do you have any idea what's going on? This is a complete surprise to me, Marion. We've always gotten along well, but I've never given her any reason to think she could leave her family and come live with me. There's nothing romantic between me and Danny, if that's what you're thinking. I stated firmly. It did cross my mind. I'm ashamed to admit it, Jack. But when I thought about everything I know about you, I realized that you would never take advantage of a sweet, vulnerable young girl, or any woman, for that matter. You don't have another woman, do you? You just don't want to tell anyone the real reason your marriage fell apart, whatever it may be, Marion said. Marion, I can only repeat that my behavior with Danny has always been completely appropriate. I would be deeply offended by any suggestion from anyone that it was otherwise. I'm sure Danny would say the same. She already has, Jack. She was questioned by the police and Child Protective Services, Marion replied. She refused to tell them anything, except for one thing, that you've always treated her wonderfully, and that you've never even used foul language in her presence. The psychologist suggested that you be present during tomorrow's session with her. She concluded that Danny trusts you far more than she trusts her father or me. They don't want to release her until they're sure she won't make another attempt, Jack. Would you be willing to be in the room with us while she's being interviewed tomorrow? Marion, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not her parent, and under the circumstances, I'm not exactly popular with the rest of your family. How does Dave feel about it? I asked. To be honest, he surprised me by objecting, Marion replied. He thinks that since you've chosen to leave the family, you shouldn't be involved with us anymore. I know you two were never close, but his attitude caught me off guard. Did something happen between you? That's a question you should ask him, Marion. I don't think I did anything that would cause hostility, unless divorcing Debbie counts, but I doubt that's been keeping him up at night, I said with a touch of humor. But getting back to your request about being present at Danny's next interview, I think it's best if I don't attend. She's your daughter and under your care. You'll handle it just fine. That same evening, I was visited by a woman, a police detective. From her questions, it was clear she believed I might know more about Danny's issues than I had initially admitted in my conversation with the officer at the hospital. She hinted that my close relationship with my niece might have been inappropriate. It was difficult to remain calm when she asked whether I had ever taken pleasure in the image of Danny naked. Then she asked if the real reason for my divorce was that I was attracted to young girls and could no longer respond to mature women. I threw the detective out, telling her I'd had enough of her sick fantasies, accusations, and insinuations. Maybe the job makes people assume the worst, but I couldn't help thinking she was the one who needed therapy. Some twisted freak. I heard that the next day, Danny returned home, but she still hadn't revealed the reason behind her suicide attempt. My informant, my younger son, a high school student, told me she had become extremely withdrawn and was required to attend therapy several times a week. Almost 2 weeks later, everything hit the fan. Lately, as had become my habit, I drank a few too many beers before bed. I usually sleep deeply, and the extra bottles only made that worse. But something caused me to wake from a dead sleep in the early morning hours. Suddenly, the lights came on, and I shot upright. Blinking several times and rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I saw a female detective standing in the doorway of my bedroom. Behind her stood a uniformed police officer and my landlord, still holding the keys in his hand. "What the hell?" I shouted. "Are you out of your minds? You can't just barge in on a law-abiding citizen. I want your badge numbers, and on top of that, I'm going to sue your asses." "You're under arrest," the detective announced with barely concealed glee. "This officer will read you your rights. Then we're throwing your perverted ass in jail." At that moment, I felt someone's arms wrap around my neck from behind, nearly making me crap the bed. With very real fear, I turned my head to see whose hands they were. "Uncle Jack." Danny sobbed. "I just wanted to stay with you. I'm sorry if I got you in trouble." How the hell did Danny end up in my bed? I tried to focus on the previous evening. I had a few beers, okay, maybe too many, and went to sleep. Up until this moment, I hadn't even seen Danny. I hadn't let her into my apartment, and I certainly hadn't invited her into my bed. Just when it seemed like things couldn't possibly get any worse, Marion, Dave, Debbie, and her parents all entered my now overcrowded bedroom. Dave looked absolutely furious. "You sick bastard." Dave growled, trying to push past the police officer to get to me. "She's just a kid, you bastard." Fortunately, for Dave, for me, or maybe for both of us, the officer managed to hold him back. Dave calmed down just enough to pretend he wanted to break free, while the officer restrained him. Still, his insults didn't lose any intensity. My confusion quickly turned into rage. How the hell does a man get into trouble for sleeping alone in his own bed? Dave's name-calling and accusations had pushed me too far. Who the hell did he think he was? "You cowardly piece of shit." I snapped, getting out of bed. "You've got a lot of nerve coming into my home and throwing this crap at me. Let's see who the real bastard is now." As I spoke, I moved toward Dave. Since the room wasn't very large, it only took a couple of steps to get right up in his face. He had already stopped shouting when I stood up, and by the time I reached him, he was backing away. Somehow, he managed to position himself so that Marion was standing between us, and between him and the police officer. "Danny, are you all right, sweetheart?" Marion asked. "Why are you here, and why were you in Uncle Jack's bed? You have to understand how this looks. Jack is going to be arrested and will likely spend a long time in prison if you can't convince us he didn't do anything wrong. That won't be easy." "What happened, honey?" "I just couldn't live at home anymore, Mom." Danny whimpered. "I didn't mean to get Uncle Jack in trouble. He didn't even know I was here. I snuck in through the bathroom window. He was asleep, and I just laid down next to him. I felt safe with Uncle Jack. He never hurt me, never. Not tonight, not ever. He's not like that." "I'll be the one asking the questions here," the detective said firmly. "You called the police to help find your daughter, so let us do our job. Danny, why do you feel unsafe at home? Has someone been mistreating you?" "Not in the way you mean," my niece replied. "It's just. I feel uncomfortable talking about it with everyone here. Danny, I called Debbie and your grandparents when I found your bed empty just after midnight, Marion said. They helped me look for you. It was my mom who decided to check for your bike and noticed it was gone. It was Debbie's idea to come here and look for you. That's why the police are here. We called them when we realized you were missing. We were all afraid you might do something reckless. You mean like what? Swallow another bottle of pills? Or do something bad with Uncle Jack? Danny shot back. You think there's something wrong with me? No, sweetheart. We're just worried that you might feel overwhelmed and do something you'll later regret. Your family loves you, and we're all concerned about your safety and well-being. You can answer the detective's questions in front of everyone, sweetheart. There are no dark secrets in this family. Please, just tell the truth and answer her questions, Marion pleaded. Marion, it would be better if she spoke to the detective in private, I suggested, as a sudden fear gripped me. You can't put the genie back in the bottle once it's out. It's very possible that Danny might say something not everyone here should hear. Jack, that's exactly why I want everyone to hear how Danny answers, Marion replied. I don't want her turning into another you, with your secrets and very strange behavior. The truth is always better. Fine, Mom, if that's what you want. I'll tell the detective what I'm afraid of, and why I feel safer with Uncle Jack. I'm afraid of Dad. Danny confessed. Me? Dave growled. I never hurt you. I've never done anything that a loving father wouldn't do. Why would you be afraid of me? A few weeks ago, I forgot to bring my baseball glove to school. Since we had a game that day, Mrs. Mack gave me permission to go home and get it during class, Danny replied hesitantly. I always cut across the empty lot behind our house when there's no snow. That's when I saw Uncle Jack bent over near his car, which was parked on the street in front of our house. He was throwing up. I ran over to see if he was okay, but he quickly got into the car and drove away. Then I went up to my room to get my glove and heard strange noises coming from Mom's room. It sounded like yelling, but quieter, so I peeked in to see what was going on, Danny explained. By then, the room had fallen completely silent. I could hear the pounding of my heart in my ears. Everyone was focused on Danny's story. Dave was starting to look noticeably paler. Dad was there, without any clothes on, Danny said, her voice trembling. He was saying awful things to a woman while hitting her, hard. She wasn't dressed either. She was yelling at him not to stop and to keep going, in a way that made me really uncomfortable. Then Dad, he just did what she asked, but way too aggressively. She kept making noises, like she was in pain. Oh my God, Marion gasped, stunned. Your father did that? Are you sure it was him, Danny? Do you know who the woman was? Of course it was Dad. I saw him clearly, and I recognized his voice. Then he grabbed the woman by the hair, lifted her head, and I saw her face. It was Aunt Debbie, Mom, Danny sobbed. I was too shaken to look at anyone, so I just stared at my feet while the storm of chaos raged around me. I had hoped to spare Marion, Chester, and Dottie from this particular dose of harsh reality. Danny had seen almost exactly what had made me sick just minutes before she did. I had stopped by their house to return a few borrowed books that my son was giving back to Marion's son that day. I lost my breakfast right there on the street before driving away. I had no idea that Danny would come home early and witness things no child should ever have to see. Eventually, the detective managed to suppress what nearly turned into a riot. Then she asked Danny to finish her story. The uniformed officer now stood in the doorway to make sure no one could leave. Dave was red-faced and sweating, while Debbie had collapsed to the floor. I grabbed my glove and left as fast as I could, Danny continued after the unexpected interruption. Then, on the day we were sent home early because of the water main break, I saw Aunt Debbie with Dad again. This time, he was sitting on the couch, and Aunt Debbie was on the floor between his legs. He was calling her awful names again and forcing her head toward him. I could hear her gasping for air. At first, I thought he was choking her. Then he'd let her go, she'd take a breath, and he'd pull her back again. It was awful. When I turned to leave, I saw Grandma's prescription pill bottle on the kitchen table. I grabbed it and ran to my treehouse. I took all the pills and drank a bottle of water. That's when Uncle Jack found me and saved me. I was too scared to tell anyone about Dad and Aunt Debbie. I knew Mom would be angry. Grandma and Grandpa would be angry too. Dad would get in big trouble, and I was afraid he might hurt me, like he hurt Aunt Debbie when she yelled at him. That's why I ran away last night and snuck into Uncle Jack's room. I was scared, and I knew Uncle Jack would never let Dad hurt me. Uncle Jack isn't like that. Danny finished, as tears streamed down her cheeks. This time, there was complete silence, unlike the chaos that had erupted just a few minutes earlier. I took a moment to think and realized I needed to speak. I owe an apology to Marion, Chester, Dottie, and especially to Danny, I began. I discovered Debbie and Dave together on the day Danny saw me throwing up in the street. I was so upset and angry that I was afraid I might kill them both. So I decided to walk away and think things through. Foolishly, I chose to simply divorce Debbie and say nothing to anyone about what she and Dave had done. I believed I was sparing all of you from the pain. I thought Debbie and Dave would come to their senses after I announced I was divorcing Debbie. I believed that deep down she would understand that I had to figure out what was really going on. That way, at least one family would be left untouched. But in reality, I'm the one who caused all this mess, I said with regret. If I had just confronted Debbie and Dave directly, we'd probably be right where we are now, but without Danny being so deeply hurt. I kept telling myself I was taking the high road, but I wasn't. I was just cruising down the coward's highway. I started feeling inadequate after watching Dave with Debbie for just a few minutes. He had complete control over her. After nearly 20 years of self-deception, I suddenly realized I had never even begun to scratch her itch. I guess that's why I chose to ride off into the sunset, instead of standing there and listening to Debbie bluntly explain what a pathetic excuse of a husband and lover I had been. I told myself I was protecting the innocent victims of this twisted pair. But in truth, I was just afraid to face the reality Debbie would throw in my face. And now Danny has paid the price for that. I'm so sorry, Danny. Uncle Jack. Danny cried, jumping off the bed and hugging me with tears in her eyes. I don't think there's anyone here who needs to be arrested, the female detective admitted. There are a couple of people I'm sure some would rather I just shot, but I'm not going to do that. I need to go file my report. I suggest you both come with me to avoid any further trouble. I don't think now is the right time for explanations or apologies. Dave helped Debbie to her feet and led her out of the room. Marion hugged both Danny and me while they cried their hearts out. Chester and Dottie stepped closer and gently rubbed Marion's back, trying to comfort her. No one said a word. No one knew what to say. Thank you for being with us. And if you're one of those who watches silently, just leave a like, it helps new stories come to light.